I'm Mimi, aka Dr. Miriam Mendelsohn, and welcome to my blog, The Human Experience. What I'd like to talk about today is the world of FA and Incel. There's a few different points I want to touch on. So let's just get started with general definitions. And listen, none of this is carved in stone. This is based on what's out there. There's no one official definition for either one. So just please take that into account. So generally speaking, FA, which stands for Forever Alone, and it refers to people who, for various reasons, have difficulty making and or maintaining close connections with people. Usually, it means people for a sexual, romantic relationship or a marriage connection. So usually it means an intimate connection. But FA can also refer to people who are literally alone, who don't feel themselves to have any friends, don't feel themselves to have a social circle, maybe don't have family or aren't close to their family. So it's really a broad term, but most commonly, I would say 2/3 of the time, 75% of the time, it means people who can't make an intimate connection with people, either for sex or for a relationship or for marriage. So, and people who identify as FA can be both male and female, and it probably skews, and again, this is just based on the reading and exploring that I've done. It's so not based on any official research. But I would say, to guesstimate, I would say that FA circles skew maybe identified FA, maybe 75% male, around roughly 2/3 to 80%. So I'm picking 75 as kind of a midpoint of that. And I would say there's no real specific ideology or belief system, just people, the definition that I would use, people who are alone and don't want to be. That's how I would define it. And the word is forever. I've seen people blogging about it who are 18 years old and 21 years old, but who haven't made intimate connections, have problems doing it, feel bad about it, and don't like it. So nobody's calling the FA police on them because they're super young. They feel themselves to be FA, they are FA. On the other side, you have people who have been alone all their life, or who have been alone many, 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 many years. And again, I'm speaking here most commonly about some kind of intimate relationship, anywhere from sex to marriage. But it can more broadly refer to people who feel alone in life. So that's FA. Incel is a term that I'm sure everybody's familiar, refers to those who are involuntarily celibate. So in the past, the word celibate, the kind of the old-fashioned meaning, was people who weren't sexual, but weren't sexual within the context of marriage, meaning they didn't get married, or they got married but didn't have relations. It was before the whole no strings attached sex thing. So in the old-fashioned meaning of the term, it didn't mean that they weren't out there sleeping around. It meant that they had, for some reason, put themselves or were in a situation where they were abstaining from sex, together with abstaining from marriage, or in marriage abstaining from sex. It didn't mean they were out there in a world where everybody else was sleeping around. However, the modern meaning of the term celibate just means somebody who is not having sexual relations. So it doesn't have that whole implication of celibate as abstaining from marriage or abstaining from sex within marriage. So let's see. So incel tends to skew, in the official circles, people who officially identify as, tends to skew much more male, so 90%, 95%, at least in terms of self-identified. And it doesn't always come with an ideology, but there are ideological themes that are found within incel circles. You don't have to have these particular belief systems or ideologies, but they are definitely found within incel circles. Some of those ideologies are, or some of those ideas are that, and this is primarily male, saying that the world, and please forgive me, this isn't going to be exact, okay? This is just a casual phrasing, that the world is unfairly stacked against people who either lack the outward physical appearance or the game, the social skills that would allow, or the combination of physical appearance and social skills that would allow them to be successful getting a sexual partner. So generally the I don't know if I made this clear, but generally the word incel refers to somebody who wants sex and isn't getting it. Okay? It doesn't mean that people can't also want a relationship, but with the word incel, involuntarily celibate, there's a little bit more emphasis put on sexual deprivation. It's not 100%, but it's definitely more emphasis than the general broad term of FA, forever alone. Okay? People in forever alone, I would say there's more of a mix between people who are specifically seeking sex and people who are seeking a relationship and sex within the relationship. Incel has both also, but in terms of what gets talked about more and what gets emphasized more, it tends to be a little bit more the lack of sex. And it doesn't mean that there aren't incels that want relationships, for sure, okay? So just in terms of the ideas that are within incel circles, there is a lot of talk about men specifically who haven't been blessed with the outer appearance, the outer attractiveness, conventional attractiveness, and the specific types of social skills and or status or achievement that would allow them to be successful in getting sexual partners, whether short-term or long-term. And there tends to be some anger about this. And there tends to be a classification of those successful men, let's say the men. They are called in incel terms Chads, like the name Chad. And Chad is, the stereotypical Chad type would be tall and good looking, muscular with a chiseled jaw and just a kind of an alpha male type of outlook. And whatever kind of either, social game or status or achievement or whatever that causes him to be able to be easily successful with the opposite sex. We're talking straight people here. And Chad generally is successful with a girl that incels call Stacy. And Stacy is kind of the female, what's the right word? Sorry. She's the female version, okay, for want of a better word. She's the female version of Chad, okay? She is conventionally very attractive. and she's the right age, she's got the right face, she's got the right figure, she's got all sorts of confidence because of it. And Chad scores with Stacy, and Stacy wants Chad. Okay? Then there are the guys, so those are not incels, okay? Those are the people that the incels are, let's say, somewhat resentful towards, because it seems like the deck has been stacked in their favor, to put it that way. Whether it's the genetic deck or just the deck of luck. So because of this, there's a certain layer of anger or resentment or hopelessness amongst incel circles, male incel circles, because they're not Chad, okay? And they are not scoring with Stacy. And some of them are not even scoring with Becky, okay? And Becky is, the little bit less glamorous, a little bit less confident, slightly less attractive female who's maybe also turning her nose up at our incel friends. So there is this level of anger because they're not being successful. Now, that's one layer of anger that happens in some, not throughout, but is found in incel circles. There's another layer of anger, and I'm not talking about people who are, violent in some way. I mean, I'm not even going there, because to me there are violent people in every circle, okay? There are violent people in various religions, there are violent people in political circles, and there's violent people who are mentally ill, and there are violent people who feel cheated by life. So I'm personally not going to focus on that here. Just talking about general anger. So the other layer of anger comes when people who identify, again, men who identify as incel, who see women, let's say the Becky types, or people who are even, more humble, shall we say, more modest appearing and seeming, Becky and her even more modest sisters, let's put it that way, that they are turning up their noses at our incel friends, and they are going after the Chads as well, okay? So not only is the incel guy, let's say, talking men here, is the incel guy not successful in scoring with Stacy, either for short-term sex or long-term relationship, he's not even scoring with Becky. And he's not even scoring with Becky's more humble sisters, okay? I don't want to get all numerical here, but for people who rate males and females on a number scale, you can just kind of figure, going down the scale. And we're talking generally here with women about outward physical appearance, okay? We're not talking about their inner loveliness and goodness, okay? So they're not scoring. That's one level of anger. Now, the other level of anger is that the incel guy, and this is where it kind of takes a step more into ideology and ways of thinking and away from actually what's happening. Because being mad because you're not scoring, that's like what's happening, okay? But there's a further step. And this further step is men who feel like women are denying them a sexual connection that should be available to them. It would be like, for example, somebody getting angry because they live in a society that's divided between extremely poor people and extremely rich people. And the deck is stacked so that the rich people help each other get richer, and they're all networked in and they have all their advantages. And the poor people are stuck being poor, and there's really no way for them to climb the ladder. It's kind of like that feeling. Like there's no opportunities available for the poor people. So the anger here is directed towards women generally, and it's that women who would ordinarily be looking at your, incel guy who's not Chad, okay? Maybe a decent guy, but he ain't Chad. they're not looking at him. They're turning their noses up at him, withholding sex from him, and instead running after the Chads of the world. And the incel guy or guys are stuck alone, no sex, no partnership. So, and that tends to be translated into anger at women, specifically the women that are withholding sex from them. So I just want to talk, that's kind of our, casual definitions here. So I just want to talk for a second, and, I might do more than one part because, there's a lot to talk about here, but just for this particular discussion, let's say like this. I think that there are a couple of things going on here that are useful maybe to mention. The first is a real basic thing, okay? Instead of dividing up the let's say the incel world, because that's where there tends to be, I would say, a little bit more anger. Instead of dividing it in terms of males and females, and say that the women are withholding what the men would ordinarily be getting because the women are just going for the top tier in terms of outer attractiveness, the top tier guys, and the lower tier guys are getting left in the lurch. So instead of looking at it as a male-female, whereas a lot of where the anger comes from is, resenting the females because the men are not being successful with them, which is, it's understandable, okay? But another way of looking at it could be this, and this isn't going to cover everything, but it's just, I think it'll add a little something here. Instead of that, one way to look at it is people who are looking for sex versus people who are looking for a relationship. So people who are, let's say a guy is looking for sex or feels sexually deprived, which does apply to a lot of the incel crowd, that they feel sexually deprived. Now, if a woman or if women were like guys and they pursued generally casual sexual encounters across the board, meaning that was their general pursuit, not by default, but not because they have no other choice, but because that's actually their first choice, then I would say it might make sense to feel resentful towards women as women. Okay, why are the women not let's say, here's a guy, let's say one guy. Okay, why are the women not choosing me? Why are they just going for this, shallow, outwardly good-looking Chad dude who's not going to treat them well anyways, and, he's just looking for sex? Well, I'd like some sex too, so why aren't the women looking at me? So there's this resentment. But how about instead if we kind of looked at the fact that most women, and I tend to quote this figure, but I would say it's probably about 60% of women aren't physically satisfied in a casual sexual encounter. Or let's say even if they might be at a place in life where they want a relationship. So either because they don't find hookups satisfying, which a majority of women don't, 3 out of 5 or 60%, and I've seen some studies on it, but I'm not holding up a study right here. I'm just quoting based on what I've read. So women, both for that reason, that they don't tend to be sexually satisfied outside of a relationship, just because they need that trust and connection in order to let go and really experience their own desire. And not all women, but again, a good chunk of them. And also because there's a lot of risk to casual sexual hookups. So there's not a lot of payoff for a lot of women. There's not a lot of pleasure, and there's a lot of risk. They can become pregnant. They can get sexually transmitted diseases, which men can too, but actually for women, I think that the incidence of transmission is a little bit higher because they're just the female sex organ is more vulnerable to bacteria and viruses. So, not to say men aren't, and not to say men don't have a risk if a woman gets pregnant, but women do perceive themselves as vulnerable in casual sexual encounters. They don't experience it as pleasurable, a good chunk of them. And also they may simply be at a time in their life or of an inclination that they want a relationship. So a woman like that it's not that she's withholding sex, it's that she may not be looking for a casual sexual encounter in the first place. Okay? So a lot of the resentment towards women is maybe a little bit misplaced, because a lot of women are actually searching for a relationship. They're not searching for a hookup. Okay? And I would also argue that the women who are having hookups, not all of them are finding it satisfying. So I'm not saying that for right or for wrong. I'm just saying that even the women who are having the hookups are not necessarily finding it satisfying. So that's one thing. And it's important because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding that men are just getting, or incel men are getting rejected because women are withholding sex from them. And I'm not saying that's not true some of the time. What I'm saying is that also a good chunk of the time you have two different people wanting two different things. A guy looking for a sexual encounter, and he's not a Chad, so he's not successful. And a woman who's looking for a relationship, and this just doesn't happen to be the guy that she wants a relationship with. It's not that she's withholding sex, it's that casual sex isn't what she was looking for in the first place. So again, I think that the contrast is maybe not between male and female so much, it's between people who are looking for hookup type sex and people who are looking for a relationship. And that tends to be, in incel circles certainly, there tends to be more men who are looking for a sexual partner and women encountering women who don't want to be with them. And I'm saying a big chunk of those women don't want to be with them simply because they don't want that hookup in the first place. Now, so that's why I think some of the resentment is misplaced towards women. It's not that they're purposely withholding sex, it's that they're not looking to have casual sex in the first place. They're looking for a relationship, and a relationship and somebody to click with is hard to find. Now, let's go into one more layer, and I think that'll be it for this particular discussion. Was it any different in the past? Okay, I'm not going to talk about caveman times when, guys were lucky to live past the age of 20, God forbid, before they, who knows, got gored by a saber-toothed tiger or tromped on by a mastodon or, just starved to death, okay? We're not talking caveman times. Let's just talk about, a couple of generations before ours. Things weren't as bad. Why? Basically, there was a time not too long ago when it was presumed that people were looking for a lasting relationship leading to marriage. And what that meant is that by and large, it was assumed that a man was looking for a single partner and a woman was also looking for a single partner. So let's just do the rough numbers on this. If you have 100 men and they are looking for single partners, and you have 100 women who are looking for single partners, in an ideal world, each one of those should pair up. That's number one. People were looking for partners leading to marriage. Number two, and this is not a male-female thing, and it's not gonna be, okay? Number two, there were family supports, there were community supports, there were religious structures, there were social supports to search and find partners for each and every available member of the community. So a family would look out for their own. A community would look out for their own. A church or a synagogue or mosque or whatever would look out for their own. Even people which meant that the more, so let's say outwardly good-looking people, there might have been some assortive mating. They might have chosen outwardly good-looking people, but they only got one. Okay? So our one Chad got one Stacy. There was none of this, super Chad dude scoring with 100 Stacys. Wasn't like that. One Chad got one Stacy. Okay? Everybody might be jealous because he got the Stacy of the town, but he only got one. And our Ethan, okay, that's just my own. Our Ethan, who is our slightly less Chadish dude, he finds his Becky, and he finds her with help from his family, help from his pastor, help from the community, help from Becky's family, because Becky's family wants to find somebody for Becky, and Ethan's family wants to find somebody for Ethan. So boom, they make sure that Becky and Ethan meet each other, and Becky is not chasing after Chad because Chad's got Stacy and everybody's only got one person. Okay, so what would happen in those kind of traditional communities, or before things changed, is that people, even people who weren't, the captain of the football team type of guy or the super glam girl, they found people. And they found people because they had a lot of help doing so. And because everybody only got to have one person. So you didn't have this idea of like a tribal chieftain with a freaking harem, which nowadays you do. You can have a guy who's, super attractive and has all sorts of game and scores with woman after woman after woman after woman, while a lot of guys are left out in the cold. This wasn't the fault of women, okay? What happened is those communities, those social supports, those family networks, those traditional religious structures, they don't exist anymore, by and large, okay? And let's just say like this, in places where they do exist, people in general at all sorts of levels of attractiveness and accomplishment, etc., are all much more successful in finding people, and they still have that kind of old-fashioned help in doing so. And, I don't mean to, say stereotypes or anything like this. I hope this isn't taken negatively. But I was friends with someone who was in a very traditional community, and she was physically, she had a physical difference. Out in the world, that might have been a challenge. In her community, wasn't a challenge at all. They found an awesome, cute dude who had his own physical difference, and they matched them both together, and they both happened to really like each other, and boom, they got married and had a family. The point I'm saying is, it's not that it has to be that way, but the point is that there was a whole lot of effort put that everybody of all different kinds would find their one partner, their one appropriate, compatible partner. Okay, that doesn't, outside of those real traditional communities, that doesn't exist anymore. Which means that people, and I'm going to argue males and females, okay, are getting left in the lurch. They don't have people trying to find them a partner, and we don't have the one person for one person matchups anymore. We have somebody who could be scoring with a whole bunch of people, and other people who are scoring with nobody, okay, which leads to anger and resentment. So, and this is true. It's definitely true when somebody's just looking for sex, for sure, because the people that they would score with sexually are going to be going after somebody that, if it's about sex, it's going to be about outward attraction, and they're going to be trying to go after the most outwardly attractive person that they can. So someone who's less outwardly attractive is going to have a hard time when it's just about sex. When it's about relationships, even if the person could be successful, people aren't out there making that one person for another person types of pair-ups like they were in the past. So even guys, let's say, who are looking for a relationship, they don't have anybody out there helping them. Okay, and by the way, P.S., when it comes to relationships, this is true of women as well, okay? Because let's say Chad is scoring with his 20 women, but he's not having a relationship with 20 women, okay? He may be sleeping with them, but those 20 women are still deprived of the relationship that they could be having with other guys. So the system is not really helping them either, unless all they want is that quick score with Chad. And I just said for a lot of women, no, that's not all they want. They want a relationship. They want that connection. So, point being, incel guys feel deprived. They experience it as sexual deprivation. Just as many, I would argue, women are feeling deprived, and they are experiencing it as relationship deprivation. A lot of incel guys are also feeling deprived of a relationship, and they're not getting help in finding it. And a lot of women want a relationship and are not getting help. Number one, are not getting help in finding it. And number two, a lot of them have been kind of swept into the thinking that what they should be doing is sexual hookups. So they're going to do sexual hookups, maybe some of them even whether they like it or not. And if they're only going to be doing sexual hookups and not really going after that relationship, maybe because they have no help in doing it, they're going to go for the most attractive guy, which is going to be the Chad, and they're going to leave our poor Ethan in the lurch. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. Basically, just a quick recap is that some of the anger towards women amongst incel circles is, I would say, misplaced, because men may want a sexual experience and they may be looking at women as if women are withholding sex, when actually what the women are doing is searching for a relationship. That's number one. And for the men who want a relationship, they are no longer in circles where they get the help to find a relationship. The women are also no longer in circles where they are getting help in finding a relationship. And to make matters worse, the women are kind of part of this sexual revolution where they're taught that what they should be wanting is hookups. So not only they're not getting help to find a relationship, but some of them are just chasing after hookups. And if they're going to chase after a hookup, they might as well chase after the most attractive guy out there. So from every angle, our incel guys are getting left in the lurch. I'm just arguing that it's not necessarily the fault of women per se. Some women want relationships, and some women have been left in the lurch the same way by the breakdown of traditional structures that would help them to find a guy. I don't know if that's been helpful. I can tell you that I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for guys who, whether they call themselves FA or incel, who want to be with someone and are not with someone. I definitely know what that feels like. I've been in that position in my life as a female. You know, they're not getting a lot of understanding, and some of them are in a tough position, and I will argue that a lot of women are in a tough position as well, whether it's because they're lacking sexual partners, or I would say often because they're lacking they can't find anybody to be with for a relationship, and they are not getting much help from there's nobody out there helping them to do it, and there's no easy way to find people. That's it for now, and maybe we'll pick up this discussion at a different time. And please leave any and all comments down below, and thanks for listening. Bye.